afternoon. My name is Kim Story Hagen. I am the marketing chair for Plaid. I am also one of the contributors, as you can see from our little e-course, Empowering Minds e-course that we launched in January. I am one of the contributors to that e-course. I speak about servant leadership and the career portion of Plaid. I'm really excited that y'all are here joining us for From Doubt to Power, Navigating Imposter Syndrome. So imposter syndrome is that uncomfortable feeling you experience when you think that you're unqualified and incompetent. You might look around and assume that everyone else knows what they're doing except for you. If you achieve something good, you might chalk up your accomplishments to just good luck. So we're going to be talking about imposter syndrome today. I am so excited to hear what Michelle has to say because this is definitely an important topic, and I'm getting ready to start a new job. And so there's definitely, it applies to me right now of making sure that I feel like I'm ready for that. So thank you all for joining us. Plaidforwomen.com is an award-winning digital media platform for women, by women. We're kind of like a mentor in your inbox with a feature article every week that's designed to inspire and empower you. And if you have not already signed up for the emails, then you could start receiving those as early as next week. At Plaid, we want you to be empowered. And in order to do that, we believe that you need support, encouragement, and enlightenment. Sometimes the problem is when you're up against a wall and you don't know what to do next, it makes you doubt yourself. And so at Plaid, we believe that everyone deserves access to mentors who support, encourage, and enlighten. And we know how it feels to doubt yourself, which is why the writers at plaidforwomen.com pour out their hearts and souls each month in order to empower you in a variety of different categories, including finance, health, career, and family. All right, I'm going to stop sharing so that I can turn this over to Michelle. I'm very excited to be introducing her. All right. Michelle Gooch wants to overcome the confusion people live in by empowering individuals and teams to operate from a place of confidence and security so that all of us have a transformative impact on our world. She does this through one-on-one coaching sessions that are designed to help you find clarity, explore new options, and uncover your unique design. She also does this through team training sessions and public speaking, where she challenges us all to look through a different lens. Michelle, thank you so much for taking us through this topic today. Let's talk about going from doubt to power, navigating imposter syndrome. Michelle Gooch.
Thanks, Kim. All right, I'm happy to be here and do this with you. So I want you to, just for a minute, turn your video on because I'm gonna ask you some questions. And I know you want to put your electric hand up, but I want you to put your actual hand up on some of this. So I'm going to read a handful of statements, and if it's true for you or if it's ever been true for you, I want you to raise your hand. So we might suffer from imposter syndrome or might have suffered from it at some point in our life if these things are true. So first statement, you feel like you got lucky when you actually prepared well and worked hard. Anybody? Okay. You find it hard to accept praise. You apologize for yourself when you didn't actually do anything wrong. That's a big one. I see us doing that all the time. You hold yourself to incredibly, sometimes impossibly high standards. Well, I was expecting some of those hands to go up right there because I know y'all. You find the fear of failure paralyzing. You avoid expressing confidence because you think people will see it as overcompensating or obnoxious. And you're convinced you're not enough. People close to you say you're not as confident as you used to be. Anybody? And then finally, you turn down opportunities for growth or visibility at work. Anybody? Okay. Before we take another step into unpacking this imposter syndrome idea, I want you to notice you're not alone. Isn't that great? It's great to discover you're not alone. And I want you also, I'm going to point out one other thing, and that is that we kind of over dramatize this by using the word syndrome, right? I mean, it sounds like a terrible, incurable, debilitating disease. So it turns out we all have some of these symptoms, and it doesn't have to be this horrible thing. We can actually go, oh, okay, this isn't as big a deal as we think it is. So if you feel better already, type in the chat, me, I feel better, because that's where we want to start today. Let me pull up my screen here. We'll jump into this. Oh, there you go. I was like, I lost everybody, but now you're back. Okay. Let's just start with defining imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome is tied to our identity. It's our sense of self-worth. And back in the late 70s, two psychologists, Pauline Rose Clance and Suzanne Imes, coined the term imposter syndrome. So we haven't even had that term for very long. And they noted these three critical attributes: thinking others have an exaggerated view of our abilities, fear of being exposed as a fraud, and then a continuous tendency to downplay our achievements. So that's the basic definition that we're working from today. And I want to share with you a story that I feel like will be shocking to you. Does everybody know Shonda Rhimes? She's an American television producer. She's a screenwriter. She's famously known for Grey's Anatomy. I'm sure you know that, and Scandal, and a bunch of others. So she was getting an award, and along with several other women in and around her industry. And before the huge award ceremony, the presenter took her and all these award winners into a back room, and she began to just go one person at a time and talk about how fantastic they were. She was just pouring out accolades on them. She named their unbelievable accomplishments, how they had defied the limits, all of that stuff. But what was interesting, that all these incredible women had the same response. And this is Shonda Rhimes is making this observation because she's in the room. They all just kind of acted like this incredible thing they accomplished just happened one day when they were mopping the kitchen and they tripped over the mop. And then this thing came out. So what's interesting to me about that is that these high achieving women in this incredible space that everybody saw as successful and accomplished were experiencing imposter syndrome, including Shonda. I want to share with you a little bit of one of the articles that's been written for Plaid. I will put this in the chat for you. It is a link to this article. It's written by one of our contributors, Christy Eckler, and her daughter, Chelsea. It's written on imposter syndrome, and I'm just going to read a couple of quick paragraphs to you because they do a great job of showing the impact of it. Imposter syndrome is like a soft whisper in the back of your mind, constantly questioning your abilities and accomplishments. It thrives on self-doubt, and it often fueled by a distorted perception of one's capacity. Even when you achieve remarkable milestones, there's a nagging belief that you've somehow lucked your way into them, or that you don't truly belong at the table of success. This nagging self-doubt, while common, can have grave implications for your career. It can hold you back from taking on new challenges, pursuing leadership roles, or speaking up in important discussions. It's akin to an anchor that's preventing you from sailing into uncharted waters, keeping you confined to your comfort zone. That's an excellent article if you have time to read it. You've got the link there. Now you can find it. Let's take a look at what some of the, I'm going to say, signs or symptoms are of imposter syndrome. When we recognize the signs in our lives or in the lives of our friends, it's the best place for us to get started, right? Until you admit it, until you see it, you can't do anything about it. So one of the first obvious signs is perfectionism. This extreme high standard that we set, and we're not satisfied with anything less than perfection. So I'm going to give you just a tip on trying to figure out if this applies to you, because a lot of perfectionists would not say they're perfectionists. They just expect life to be perfect. It's how it's supposed to be. So notice when you're unwilling to consider a task is complete due to some minor imperfections. The things that other people might say aren't a problem. Are you still pushing for it to get done a little bit better? If so, perfectionism might be something that is raising its head in your life. Another sign, second sign we have on the slide here is overworking. If you feel the need to work harder and longer than other people in order to prove your worth, notice the motive, and it comes at the expense of your self well-being, well, then you're overworking. And so I would suggest that you start observing, are you the first one to arrive and the last one to leave? Are you taking on more tasks than you can handle in order to avoid appearing inadequate? Notice the motive. Now, sometimes you're working hard because of the season you're in, but notice the motive behind the hard working. And then the third thing here is undermining achievements. That's what we were seeing in Shonda Rhimes' observation of these incredible women. This attributing your success to something else, to an external factor like luck, or thinking you've deceived others into overestimating you. To notice if this is true of you, pay attention to your internal dialogue after receiving praise or achieving a goal. Are you dismissing it as unearned in your head? Perfectionism, overworking, undermining achievements. These are all signs of imposter syndrome. The next sign is fear of failure. Viewing failure as a reflection of our ability, or avoiding challenges because you want to prevent the potential of failure. That's a sign that fear of failure is really making a lot of your decisions for you. So a tip to notice if you're avoiding projects like new projects or leadership roles due to fear of not meeting those expectations of others. Fear of failure. And the last one I'm going to mention here is this difficulty accepting praise. If you're feeling uncomfortable with recognition or praise, or you fear that you won't be able to live up to whatever it is they're saying about you in the future, then you are probably a praise avoidant kind of person. And so I want you to reflect on your reactions to compliments. This will help you know if this is true about you. Do you deflect? Do you deny? Do you discount any praise or recognition? Recognizing these signs, there's several more, but these 5 signs of imposter syndrome is a crucial step toward us overcoming it. By becoming aware of these signs, both professional and personal context, it can be either, we can begin to challenge and change our thought patterns, begin to lead with more confidence, begin to show up more authentically. The goal is not that we would never feel imposter syndrome. We would never experience it, but more to recognize that we feel it and then adjust our self-perception. So let me ask you a question. What are we doing? What are we doing ourselves? What are we doing in our families? What are we doing in our workplaces? What are we doing in our culture? What are we doing that continually reinforces self-doubt and this feeling of unbelonging? I'd love for you to type in the chat. What do you feel like we're doing that reinforces self-doubt and a feeling of unbelonging? I'm going to keep moving us through the presentation, but I want you to start typing those things in the chat. What do you feel like is happening in our world? Maybe you're doing it personally or it's happening around you to reinforce self-doubt and the feeling of unbelonging, because that is what is fostering imposter syndrome. All right, so let's take some steps toward overcoming imposter syndrome. The first thing is to distinguish between humility and worthiness. Imposter syndrome oftentimes boils down to feeling unworthy. I like how Seth Godin puts it in his blog. When you feel unworthy, any kind of response, any positive feedback, any reward feels like a trick or a scam or the luck of the draw. Isn't that true? I mean, when we feel unworthy, it really doesn't matter what's happening outside of us. We're not going to feel the positive of what's happening. So I think it's important for us to recognize that it's possible to feel worthy without being entitled. See, so much of the time we think, oh, I need to withdraw into unworthiness so that I don't come across as proud and, obnoxiously confident. But the truth is, we can be worthy and humble at the same time. It can be both and we need to work towards it, whatever that looks like for you. We don't have to feel like a fraud and also be gracious, open, humble. You can do worthy, gracious, open, humble. You don't have to feel like a fraud. You don't have to experience that side of it. So distinguish between humility and worthiness. Make sure you realize that you can have both. That helps us overcome some imposter syndrome experiences. Another step toward overcoming imposter syndrome is letting go of our inner perfectionist. Many people who suffer from imposter syndrome are high achievers, people who have set extremely high standards for themselves and are committed to doing their best and being their best. Now, I'm all for us doing our best and being our best, but this ridiculous standard that we cannot achieve is feeding our imposter syndrome. So when we feel like a fraud, it's usually because we're comparing ourselves to this perfect outcome that's really not realistic. So in order to let go of our inner perfectionist, Step one, recruit some accountability. Decide that we're going to start letting go of it and find some trusted friends or colleagues. Tell them, hey, I'm going to start refusing this perfect outcome and I need you to help me, hold me accountable to that. Step two, accept good enough. Now, I'm a recovering perfectionist, so I am in this place of accepting good enough. And I know there are people around me that are like, golly, could you just raise your standard just a little bit? I have learned to accept good enough. Not only can no one do everything perfect, but holding ourselves to that standard can actually be super counterproductive. I mean, sometimes when you hold yourself to that perfect standard, you end up procrastinating on things because you can't hit that standard. Or you end up beating yourself up, or you lose a lot of time or energy or mental bandwidth. So, step back, ask yourself, when is good enough good enough? So what are some ways that you what are some ways that you can start accepting good enough? Anybody have some ideas about what that looks like? People that have been there, done that. I'd love for you to type in the chat some of the things that you've done to accept good enough. Love all these comments that you guys made about this, the things we do to create self-doubt and unbelonging. So good. All right. Tell us what you're doing to accept good enough. Those of you who are perfectionists. That's a great question, Lindsay. Ask yourself, is it really worth the energy? And then be honest. That's really good. Be honest. I was leading a group of executive leaders the other day, last week, and I told them one of the guidelines for the group was that they would be honest, and they were all like, of course, that's what. And then I was like, no, I'm not talking about being honest with us. I'm talking about being honest with yourself. And then they were all like, oh. So yes, is it worth your energy? Ask yourself that, and then be honest with yourself. All right, then step 3 on letting go of inner perfectionism is weigh the cost. That's exactly what Lindsay just said. What is it costing you to hold to this perfection standard? Are you losing time, energy, money, relationships? What's it costing you? And is it really worth that? All right, the third thing we're going to talk about as far as a way to overcome imposter syndrome is managing our thoughts. Depending on who you're listening to, who's giving you the research, people say we have 60,000 thoughts a day. Some people say more. You can find a different number, but it's a lot. Whatever number you find, you're going to find it somewhere around this. 60,000 thoughts a day. And 75% of those tend to be negative. Unless we've really began to work and gotten intentional about managing our thoughts, we're going to have 75% of those negative. And in our brain, we have 100 billion neurons. Now, our thoughts impact our neurons. And so if we are in the middle of negative thoughts, we create what I'm not a medical doctor, y'all, so I should never talk about the brain, but I'm about to tell you something. We create these ruts. I liken them to ruts in a dirt road. We create these ruts where you just kind of fall into them pretty easily. Your tires just go into them. That's what happens with your 100 billion neurons. You start creating these places, these neurons that are automatically taking over, and you're experiencing the same direction. So it's important for us to manage our thoughts. And we all engage in cognitive distortions. In fact, some of y'all have already mentioned a handful of those in the chat. thought patterns that are exaggerated, patterns that influence our emotions and behaviors, but they're exaggerated. And so they're taking us in a direction we don't want to go. They often operate in the background of our minds, and they shape our reactions and feelings without us being really consciously aware. Some of those cognitive distortions are listed here. There's more, but we're just going to start with these today. When we think about managing our thoughts, one of the patterns that we fall into is this all or nothing thinking, where we're viewing a situation as black or white, and we're not finding any gray in it. So it might sound like, if I don't get this perfect, I'm going to be a complete failure. If we were going to shift our thought a little bit there, it would serve us better to say, hey, no one is perfect, and I will do my best, and that will be good enough. You see the difference in those two different thoughts and where they would lead us. Another cognitive distortion is overgeneralization, making these broad interpretations based on a single event or a few events, thinking that, one mistake you made is always going to reoccur. That's always going to happen. So, for example, if you're giving a presentation to the board and you're certain you will do a terrible job of communicating because the last presentation you gave to your colleagues left everyone confused. So that's the thought that's running in your mind. I'm going to do a terrible job. I've done this before and it's going to be terrible. But what we really want to do is shift that thought to something that, first of all, is more realistic and more helpful for us. And we could say something like, actually, the last presentation I gave made me more aware, helped me learn some things. Now I know how to craft this presentation. I have more knowledge and experience now. You see, there's truth in that. And it keeps us from taking our billions of neurons down the wrong road. Filtering is another cognitive distortion where we focus solely on the negative and we discount the positives. For instance, we fixate on the criticism. Someone tells us 5 great things, and one thing we need to improve on. And then we're fixated on that one thing. We filtered out all the positive stuff they gave us and we fixated on that one thing. Sometimes we filter out people's facial expressions or the questions they've been asking when we think I'm the only one in the room that doesn't understand this. But really, there's all these cues that tell us I'm not alone here. There's other people that are wanting to get answers and needing to ask questions. Discounting positives, it's kind of the same as filtering, but it just invalidates the positive experiences or attributes or comments that people have made, often believing they don't count. Like if you have something positive about you and you're saying to yourself, hey, that just doesn't count. That's not really a big deal. So discounting positives is another cognitive distortion. And then the last one we're going to look at is catastrophizing. Whew. Imagining the worst case scenario, imagining the worst possible outcome. So it would be, I'm the most awkward person in the room, and I made such of myself. Instead of going, oh, you know what, I'm blowing that to a really big problem, a catastrophe. And really the truth is other people feel awkward too. And I choose to move through this and not take it so seriously. Or this wasn't my best moment, but I'm probably making it out to be worse than it is. You see how if you shift those thoughts, it changes the direction you're going. It changes the imposter syndrome that you're feeling. So I'm gonna drill this in just a little bit farther by saying we understand, we see that an incident happens, emotion comes from that, and then we base our actions on our emotions. But what we miss is right there after the incident, in a really nanosecond, we have thoughts come into our mind, and the emotions come from the thoughts, and then the action comes from the emotion. So, for example, I get cut off in traffic. That's the incident. My emotion is anger, and I want to shake my fist at them. But you know what? I had a thought in between there. And what I thought is, you sorry so and so. You think you own everything. You think you're so important. You think you have to get there first. That's the thought that's coming through. And that's where the anger came from. So when we learn to manage our thoughts, when we learn to really recognize our thought patterns and which ones are contributing to imposter syndrome, we can stop this cycle of self-doubt and feeling like a fraud and ignoring the evidence of competence and success that are true about us. So I want you to just pause for a moment and reflect. I'm going to ask you to think about your most recent professional situation where you felt inadequate or doubted your ability. And stop right now and write down the thoughts that went through your mind during that situation. A recent professional situation where you felt inadequate or doubted your ability. What thoughts were going through your mind? Jot them down. Once you have those thoughts jotted down, look at this slide and decide which thought patterns you're uncovering. Which thought patterns, which of these, whether it's generalizing, filtering, catastrophizing, which of these common cognitive distortions are you seeing in those thoughts that you jotted down? All right, once you see those thought patterns, would you just type in the chat what you're seeing? We don't need to know what the thoughts were, just what is the distortion that you were operating under. Sometimes simply recognizing that we're operating from this distorted thought pattern is enough, and it helps us in the future stop that. So what I would love to do, the next step, is to challenge these thoughts. So you recognize the thought, what distortion it is, and then now we challenge the thought. We find evidence that contradicts that distortion, that thought, and we begin to formulate a more balanced, helpful, rational thought in response. So I'd love for us to try this, to actually have someone volunteer. We won't do it with everyone, but have someone volunteer and us begin to work through this idea of how do I shift this thought that I'm so used to being in the middle of all the time? How do I shift it to something that's actually helpful? Does anybody want to volunteer? It's not a requirement. Leveda. Hey, how are you? Let's see. Can you unmute? Yeah, there you go.
Hi. How are you?
I'm good. It's good to see you.
to see
Okay,
you.
let's start with, if you're willing, tell us two or three of the thoughts that you've had, the thoughts that you jotted
Okay,
down.
sure. I don't know how, or I don't know enough about it to be good and to be good, to be
Mhm.
effective. Um,
That's a
that's the
good
biggest
one.
one. If I don't know everything about it, then I don't think I should do it.
Okay, that's a really good
Yeah.
one. That's one we can all share in. Uh,
Yeah.
all right. So when you looked at the list, did it fall under any of these categories that we talked about, these distortions?
Yeah, I think it definitely fell under all or nothing.
Yeah. Okay.
Probably some of discounting the
Mhm.
knowledge I do have
Mhm.
about that particular thing.
That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what we want to do is we want to um, challenge the thought with some evidence, like
Mhm.
something that contradicts it. So I don't know how, I don't know enough to be good at it. What is some evidence that you have that says that's actually not completely true?
Right. Um,
Can you come up with some evidence?
yeah, yeah. Um, mainly, my whole career has been communications, and I'm now looking for a job again. And so much is surrounded by social media, and I don't feel like I know enough about social media marketing.
Okay.
So, but I've been doing the social media for our church's page, and the interactions have increased, it looks like, since
Okay.
I've been doing it. I edit the sermons and do the YouTube and do all the posting for the events, and
Mhm.
it looks like there's more interaction and activity.
Okay. So that's great evidence. I'm doing it and
Mm,
engagement has improved.
yes.
Um, so another piece of evidence could be in the same situation. I can learn. There are lots of
Yes.
options for me to learn. There's lots of
Mhm.
ways for me to gain it. So you've got at least two, probably if we spent more time on it, even more pieces of evidence that contradict that thought.
Right.
That's what we want to do. We want to go through and find pieces of evidence that contradict the thought. And then we want to formulate a thought that's going to be more helpful to you. When you think about it, in fact, anybody can give us some suggestions. When you think about a thought that is believable, something that is true, that you could replace it with, what comes to mind? Anybody have suggestions for Lebeda? Lebeda, anything come to mind for you?
Well, it's kind of what we're already talking about is I'm doing it, even though I
Mm-hmm.
don't know as much as other people know about, um, you know, what time to post and
Mm-hmm.
how to increase exposure. And I mean, I understand targeting and all of that, but I am doing it. I'm doing it on several social media pages.
So yeah, so that's a switch. So you take that thought, I don't know enough, and you instead you say, actually, I'm doing it, and I
Mhm.
can learn the rest.
Yes.
And so that changes how it impacts you and what actions you take next. When we manage our thoughts that well, it shifts everything about what happens next. Thanks, Laveda, for volunteering.
Sure.
You were brave. All right. So commit to this idea of noticing the thought patterns, thinking about whether they're distortions, and then what thought would actually work in place of that. What thought is helpful and true, but takes me in a different direction. All right. We started with the idea of distinguishing between humility and worthiness, knowing that you can have both. That actually is about managing your thoughts. And then we talked about letting go of our inner perfectionist. that's about managing our thoughts. And then we talked about managing our thoughts. So now I'm going to take us to a fourth step for overcoming imposter syndrome. That isn't about managing our thoughts, okay? Let me go back here. All right, so this fourth idea here is to track and measure your success. So because so much of imposter syndrome is us not believing that we have the qualities or the capacity or the achievements, it becomes really important to start seeing our success instead of defaulting to, I was lucky, or, it was somebody else's something. The truth is, it was your hard work, your knowledge, your preparation. So start tracking your wins. That may mean that you stop at the end of the day and jot down in a journal all the wins, all the successes for that day, or it may mean you do it at the end of the week or the end of the month, but somehow start tracking. In the same vein, I love to track, maybe not even track. I love to keep positive reinforcement. People that have written me emails or handwritten thank yous or notes that emphasize something I've done well. I like to keep those. I literally keep them in a folder called encouragement, and I go back and read through them when I need to. So somehow keep some ways to track your success, your wins. And then I'm going to take this in a little different direction because it also is a helpful tool. And that is, go ahead and make a list of what you think are your failures. Go ahead and make a list of those failures, and then write next to that, here's where I failed, write down what you learned from it. Write down what was made possible by it, that quote unquote failure, or what skills you gained, or how you honed in on something different. A lot of times, if we will track our successes and also kind of evaluate and analyze our failures, we begin to see the success. So I want you to pause right here and think about those. I mentioned 3 ways to track successes. Which one of those do you want to start using? Make a note of it and start using one of those ways, at least, if not all 3 of them, to track your success. All right, then finally, say yes to new opportunities. It's obviously impossible to say yes to everything, especially when you're feeling stressed or spread thin. But it's all too common for people who have imposter syndrome to turn down career-making opportunities because they don't feel like they do a good job. So when you're presented with a new opportunity, it's important to distinguish between 2 voices in your head. One telling you not to do it because you're not worthy. You have two, and the other one saying you have too much on your plate. So you have 2 different voices. That first voice is imposter syndrome. So say yes anyway. Now, if the second voice is telling you you have too much on your plate, you spread too thin, well, that's a whole different story. But if the motive is because you don't feel like you're worthy, because you don't feel like you can do it, then say yes anyway. Keep Richard Branson's famous quote in mind. If someone offers you an amazing opportunity and you're not sure you can do it, say yes. Then learn how to do it later. That's what Richard Branson says. I know it could be intimidating to take on a role that you don't feel like you could succeed in, but man, that's part of the pilgrimage. That's part of the journey, is that we learn as we go. I'm going to take you back to where I started. I was telling you about Shonda Rhimes in the beginning. This is Maya Angelou. I have written 11 books. Well, she's written more than that, but that's when she was saying this. I've written 11 books, but each time I think, uh-oh, they're going to find out now. I've run a game on everybody and they're going to find me out. Maya Angelou, I don't know if you know her story, but my word, the woman is a picture of success. and she had imposter syndrome. So I want us to recognize that this is something we share in common, and we're not alone in this. And we want to begin to accept humility and worthiness can coexist. We want to let go of our inner perfectionists. We want to manage our thoughts and keep records of our success. And I think really great next step for us too is to keep the conversation going in professional circles so that we all begin to see, oh, we're all wrestling with this. All right, I'm gonna leave you with that. If you want more conversation, more information, you want to talk about it some more, take a picture of this, a slide, and contact me. I'm gonna pass this back to Kim.
All right. Well, great job, Michelle. Hey, can we give
Thanks.
her a round of applause? Like, thank you for all of that great information, helping us to identify when we have imposter syndrome, and then some great opportunities for managing our thoughts and overcoming, or at least, mitigating what happens when we're suffering from imposter syndrome. Did anybody have any questions for Michelle? Oh, Lindsay is asking if you can put your contact slide back up, if you don't
Okay,
mind doing that again real quick.
I'll do that. Can you see it?
And then, yes, so her email is michelle@lifebydesign.guru. Website is www.lifebydesign.guru. And of course, she also has a LinkedIn profile. And Lindsay says she's good to go now.
Okay.
So were there any follow-up questions? I think we've got a couple of minutes for some Q&A. What was the number one thing that y'all took away from today? Okay, Lindsay does have a quick question.
Thank you, Michelle, for today's session. It was great.
You're welcome.
I do have a quick question. I just wanted your opinion. I have some questions I'll chat with you about offline, but I have a question about what do you think about the concept of fake it till you make it? Some people think that that's good, and some people think that it's not good. I'm just curious what you think about that.
So I understand the reasoning behind that. So obviously, if you show up acting confident, you'll likely become more confident. So there's some really good in that idea of just do it, just get in there and do it. However, the other side of that is if we're faking it, we're never talking to anyone else about what we're experiencing, and it makes us even more isolated. So there's good and bad in that. So do it to a certain extent, but don't do it to the extent to where you get isolated and alone. Thanks for that question, Lindsay. Someone else said they had a question. Was it you, Janetta?
She was asking if the recording is going to be sent out.
Yes, it will get sent out to everyone who registered.
And I was saying on the fake it till you make it, men do it all the time. Women are the ones who sit back and say we're not worthy and try to convince ourselves.
Mhm.
Men bluff it. We just need to learn that happy medium of bluff. And most of us, I find myself, I might bluff it and go in there, and then I'm running right off trying to do some research to see why I ate. So I just think that we need to kind of act more like men do, because they don't know it. They've been running the country, and look how screwed up it is. So,
They
I
don't know
just think
you were.
we are told to smile and to do all these things,
Mhm.
and we just need to not do that. It's hard. I'm perfectionist central. I beat myself up every time I make a mistake, and I have to constantly do those pep talks of you're only human, you're only human.
Mhm.
So I get it. I'm not trying to say I don't understand, but I see men go into meetings and you just look at, especially young men, they don't know anything. But anyway, I believe in the fake it till you make it, but figure out what it is that you're faking
Mhm.
and then stop faking it as soon as you can.
And to your point, I don't have the statistics right on the top of my tongue, but when you apply for jobs, Levada, I think you said you're in the middle of looking for a job. Men will apply for a job. There's 10 expectations, 10 critical qualities they have to have. They will apply for that job if they have 40%, I think is the statistic. 40% of what's 4 out of 10 things. Women won't apply for it unless we have all 10. So that's to your point of, yes, let's get in there and start moving ourselves forward and figuring it out as we go. Gail, you had your hand up.
Yeah, just on that fake it till you make it. My generation, that's how we made it. But what we always had on the side was some female, usually, that we could go to and say, girl, I really got through that, didn't I? And then we would work it out after the fact. So you fake it up front and then you make it after the fact.
I like it. Awesome.
I love that. Some great discussion and some great questions. Michelle, how are we doing on time?
I think we need to wrap it up.
Okay. Well, as Michelle said, we need to be embracing this idea of yes. And one of the things that she is doing to all for the participants today is one of you will have the opportunity to have a free coaching session with her. So who's going to say yes, they want to be the winner of the free coaching session?
Of course.
All right, pick me. All right. Well, who is going to be the winner? And we're going through the names, and it is going to be Levada.
Oh, yay.
All right, so Levada, you are our winner. And so Michelle will be connecting with you on that free coaching session. For the rest of you, keep showing up to the things that Michelle does, because she likes to give away free coaching sessions. And Levada, Michelle will be reaching out to you via email. And then also, we have these live events like Michelle did today, but also just a reminder, we do have that e-course, which has just so much great information. Gail was also a contributor, Michelle. And so if you're really looking to develop that empowered mindset, the e-course is a great one, and you can do it on your own time. And there's a workbook that goes along with it that put a lot of effort into that to make it successful. So you've got all these amazing women who were contributors. And I think, Michelle, what's the price on the e-course?
$127.
Okay. So you can see, not a huge out of pocket expense, and lots of great information there. And that is it for my part. Michelle, what else did you want to say as we wrap up?
That is it. I'm happy to have been here with you and to discover that we're all in it together.
All right. Well, thank you, ladies. We will hope to see you at the next one, and follow us on Facebook and LinkedIn. We do post our events, and also the featured articles get put there. So there's lots of great information that shows up on our Facebook and LinkedIn pages, and it makes it really easy to find the most recent articles. All right. Enjoy your Wednesday.